A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to you all. Thank you all for joining us today. We have an exciting and informational afternoon in store for you. I wanted to let everyone know that the event today is being recorded, just a panel discussion, not a one-on-one session. Before we start, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe, and this land of the Coast Salish peoples, which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. Many of you join us from other locations, and therefore we acknowledge and honor the tribal nations and traditional lands where you reside. Hello, everyone. I'm Soumita Bhattacharya. I'm an independent visual journalist and the Vice President for programs for the Asian American Journalists Association's Seattle chapter. Founded in 1981, AAJA is a nonprofit professional and educational organization with more than 1,600 members. The Seattle chapter promotes the association's mission to provide encouragement, information, advice, and scholarship assistance to Asian American and Pacific Islander students who aspire towards professional journalism careers. We also promote bringing together journalists and media professionals to advance diversity in newsrooms and ensure fair and accurate coverage of communities of color. Each year, we coordinate the Northwest Journalists of Color scholarships with other NJC members for aspiring student journalists. In all, 7 to 8 reporting, visual journalism, and founder scholarships are awarded. You can find more information at aajaseattle.org and on our Twitter and Facebook handles, which I will drop in the chat soon. I now invite my co-organizer, Elizabeth, to introduce herself. Elizabeth.
Thanks, Soumita. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Elizabeth Sharpe, and I'm a science and technology writer, and I manage communications from the University of Washington Information Technology. I've been involved and on the board of the Northwest Science Writers Association for the last 3 years. Our organization represents people who write science for the public. We are journalists, public information officers, bloggers, editors, producers, videographers, podcasters, book authors, photographers, illustrators, and strategists. Our mission is to improve science literacy and improve the professional lives of our members. We offer a mentorship program, and hint, our current application closes in 2 days. We also offer career development grants, writing awards, and more. We offer different membership levels, including a student membership at only $20 a year. You can find us at nwscience.org and on Twitter and Facebook, where I'll drop in the chat. So I just want to give a little overview of how the event will go today. The 3 representatives from our sponsoring organizations are here. Asian American Journalists Association Seattle, Northwest Science Writers Association, and the Seattle Association of Black Journalists. You can click on the logos featured on the floor plan and find out more about each association and about membership. If you need help, you can go to the help desk on the first floor or chat with one of the event organizers. We all have a star on our avatar, and I see some questions already in the chat. So the event will start today with a panel presentation, followed by 2 25-minute breakout sessions. Participants who have registered, you indicated 2 areas of interest, and you've been assigned to those. So please look at your assignments. I'm going to drop that in chat right now if you haven't had a chance to look at that. So in the first breakout session, you're going to go to the one that you're assigned in breakout session number 1. So each table will be hosted by a professional working in that field. So next, I'm going to introduce my co-organizer, Colin.
Thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Colin Durant. I'm a news producer with KIRO 7 in Seattle, and I'm also the event coordinator for the Seattle Association of Black Journalists. We are the local affiliate chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists. We are a nonprofit or professional organization whose goal is to be a resource and supporter of Black journalists, writers, and communications professionals in Washington because we believe Black voices matter. Every year, we award the Patricia Fisher Endowed Scholarship, named for our co-founder. Fisher was a reporter at the Seattle Times who later became the first woman and first Black person to be an editorial board member and columnist. We offer memberships for professionals and students. You can find us online at sabjonline.org and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We will drop all those links in the chat shortly. And now we're going to get to our virtual panel. And I'd like to invite all our panelists who are joining us to turn on their cameras and mics right now. And we are grateful to all five of you for joining us today. We'll start this with each panelist introducing themselves for a couple minutes, and then we'll have a short discussion. There will be some Q&A. There will be Q&A. Hopefully, we'll have some time for that from you at the end of it. Please enter those questions in the Q&A portion of this presentation, and I'll see if we have enough time to get to them before we start our group sessions at 3 o'clock. But first, let's let our panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with Corinne.
Hi, everyone. My name is Corinne Chen. I'm a senior video journalist and a co-lead for the Newsroom's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. And I've been at the Times since 2014. And most of the video that we do, it's on seattletimes.com. And we do a lot of short films, documentary style video, character-driven video. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Okay. And Andrew, you're up next, and you'll unmute yourself, but then you're up.
Thank you. Didn't want any background noise. Sorry about that. I'm Andrew Hammond. I am a journalist for the Tacoma News Tribune. I've been in the business for about 15 years, but have been in Tacoma since about October of 2018. I've done a little bit of everything: radio, TV, print, digital, and I'm very passionate about this business and have worked mainly in sports, but currently on the news side of things.
Okay, Naomi.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Naomi Ishisaka. I'm the Assistant Managing Editor for Diversity, Inclusion, and Staff Development at the Seattle Times, as well as the Social Justice Columnist. I also have a background in photography and design, and so I can talk about those things as well, but really glad to be here and excited to answer your questions.
Okay. Sarah, you're next.
Hi, everybody. My name's Sarah McQuate. I prefer Sarah, but you can, she, her pronouns are also fine. I'm a public information officer at the University of Washington. And the very short version of what I do is that I take cool research at the UW and try to get it out into the world. And obviously, you can give a longer version of that later. My path here is that I actually have a PhD in biochemistry. So I started out as a scientist and then transitioned to become a science writer. And obviously more on that later as requested.
Okay. And Essex.
Thank you, Colin. Hello, everyone. I'm Essex Porter. I'm the lead political reporter for KIRO TV Channel 7 in Seattle. I have been a television news reporter since disco was popular. And don't let your parents and grandparents tell you that it wasn't popular, because it really was.
On that note, we're a few questions. This is open for all of you. The first thing I want to think about is, like, when it came to getting your start in what you do now. We all had somebody who inspired us or helped us kind of get started. What were, like, two of the biggest things that person may have taught you?
I'll start. Unless anybody else is jumping. Okay, I'll just start. I wanted to start with a quick discussion of what a mentor looks like, because especially for me being in grad school, like, we kind of automatically assume that our mentor is our advisor, but that is not necessarily the case. And so for me, a mentor is someone who sees you for who you are and sometimes actually sees your potential more than you can. So that was sort of the first thing a mentor has taught me, is sort of like, hi, I actually see you and I think you can do this. And I don't know, I feel like I'm talking too much. I want everyone else to talk too. So make this short and sweet. But yeah, I think things that mentor has taught me is, like, I'm worth doing this. And then B is sort of like pushing me into the pool a little bit. So when I finished my PhD, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I really liked talking about science, but I wasn't really sure how to like start doing science communication. And yeah, so the other things my mentors have done is sort of been like, nope, just go. And really quickly, I did the science communication program at UC Santa Cruz. And part of that was like literally like I was in a lab one day and like 2 weeks later, I was like working at a newspaper as a writer. And so it's like just literally pushing me into the pool and being like, you're writing now, go.
I think as somebody who got into TV journalism, I was just in the low level, and I just had producers who took an interest and said, what do you want to do? Because I was just helping an assignment desk, like call police and fire agencies and learn how to do that and ask them things. And it's like, do you know how to write for broadcast? And I'm like, no, not the specific thing, and it's like, do you want to learn? And I was like, absolutely. And thus here we go.
For me, I really struggled with finding mentorship as a student and in undergrad and grad school. And I quickly realized that a lot of that is because, especially at these predominantly white institutions, a lot of professors adopt people that they see themselves in, right? And that extends past school, that extends into the newsroom. A lot of editors will adopt mentees who they might see the younger version of themselves in, or they might see their kids in and relate to. And, you know, for underrepresented people, for people of colors and LGBTQ journalists who might identify in any way, I think that you have to be really active in seeking a mentor. And don't be afraid to ask someone to be your mentor. And it's not like you can only have one mentor. You can have several mentors. You can have people that you look to advice on one area of storytelling, or people you look to for advice on career development. And so I think just recognize that in journalism, no one's just going to hand you an opportunity, especially if you identify as a member of an underrepresented group. So seek those opportunities out, be bold, ask for them, you know, try to get over your imposter syndrome. And I think all journalists can be better journalists if they, you know, try to exhibit a little bit of leadership and initiative.
One thing that for me personally, I know that somebody had said something, I believe it was Sarah, talking about, you know, how a mentor comes in. For me, I know it must have been like serendipity or a blessing or something, because it was something that I've always wanted to do. Like, I'm like the weird kid who wanted to do this since he was like 4 years old. And so like I never had an outlet for it. And so when I was 15, I was working at a radio station. Like the first week I was there, and one of the DJs, you know, went out of his way and was like, hey, I see you have a passion for this. Let's keep working with it. And you're like, oh, okay. And then like the next week I'm working for my student paper, and my teacher's like, hey, just write whatever you want, and like you'll make mistakes along the way. And I didn't understand that mentorship then, but then I realized, I was like, oh, it all makes sense. So like that organic feel of gaining a mentor and having somebody who wants to push you into the deep end. And it's not that they're pushing you just for pushing you sake. They see it in you and they want to mold you. And that's such a special, special thing that hopefully one day that, you know, everybody listening to this they'll be able to tell that story. So I'll shut up now. Sorry.
I agree with the sentiment of showing your passion, because you know, those who are already in a newsroom or in a professional situation, when we see a younger person coming in newer but has a passion for it, then you know, we will instinctually, many of us, just reach out and offer just a touch of guidance, sometimes unsolicited. And it's not like, you know, you're hanging a sign on yourself and saying, I'm your mentor. You're just saying, you know, in this situation, try this. Or if you ask a bit of advice, and then you may then end up connecting, you know, a little more, you know, on a personal level, on sort of an emotional, professional level with a particular person who becomes the mentor. But you may not need to seek a particular individual first. show your interest, show your passion, show your dedication, and mentors will sort of come to you.
And I would just say, like, for my for my part, I was really fortunate to be part of a number of programs, both from the Seattle Times and the Asian American Journalists Association and the Northwest Journals of Color, that really introduced me to a lot of folks that I could use as role models and mentors. And I remember one of the heads of the program said something that really stuck with me, and he didn't say exactly this way, but I'm going to say it sort of in the new way, which is how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think about that a lot, which is that everything that we do and how we conduct ourselves and the integrity we bring to our work and our communities and our relationships, all of them carry with us in whatever we do, and we can't be messy over here and then expect to have integrity in the work that we do in our jobs, right? And I think sometimes that's hard for folks to separate, but if you start that process early and think about, okay, every single thing I do is how I do everything, and that reflects on me. That's actually my walking resume. That's actually what I'm carrying with me every single day. And so when somebody asks Colin, like, what do you think about Naomi? He's going to think about the last time he interacted with me and what I did and how I conducted myself and the integrity I brought to that. And so, just think about that as you go forward.
These are just amazing answers, and I think the value, at least that I'm picking out of them, is that there's not always one thing, because we are dealing with different facets of an industry that for many of us isn't designed to help us or bring the best out of us necessarily, and we have to put our own best foot forward a lot of the time. The next is the thought about, like, there's been a lot of change in journalism and communications. It's kind of a constant. I think the next question I have is just, what's the biggest pivot or change you've had to make in your career, or figuring out what comes next as those things change? It's a hard one. I think about, because I think back to when TV stations started doing all the content, a lot of web content, and trying to figure out how they could do it, and we're still all trying to figure that out, what that kind of integration is, and where those opportunities are for all of us. But
I don't know if this necessarily answers your question, but for my purposes, I only wanted to be, kind of like what Andrew said, I only wanted to be in journalism. But after the recession hit and it took out our little startup ethnic media outlet that I was the editor of, it really was a terrible time to be out of journalism, and a terrible time to try to be, pursuing journalism in the height of the recession. So I started doing communications work, and I think one of the things that really served me well working at a small publication is that I learned a lot of different skills. So I was doing not just the writing and editing, but also design and photography and taking out the garbage and all the other things that need to be done. But that served me well, because as I moved forward, I wasn't just doing writing or wasn't just doing one thing. So I was able to kind of use that to get different types of opportunities that might have been more difficult if I'd specialized too much and never really been exposed to those other parts of the work and the business. And that's served me really well.
Me, I know that, like, there's been 2 times when the business and just the journalism industry has kind of changed. You kind of have to pivot. I know, like, the first time it was for me is when I first got into college, and I got a sports media scholarship from a community college. And so the thing about this scholarship was they had you doing everything. It was TV, it was radio, it was print, digital, all of that. And so and during this time, everything was being transferred over to high definition, and everything was going digital. So there would be classes in the morning where I'm to, edit film, like literally just cutting the film. And then at night I'm doing digital. And so you're basically going from, like, the Stone Age to the digital age. And it was fascinating. And when you're young, you're like, oh, this is awesome. And then when you look back, you're like, holy crap, how did I do that? But I think now, just this time, in journalism right now, everything feels more polarized. the culture of this country is not good and the state of the country is not good. So you're having to pivot and you're having to cover maybe more hard-hitting stories than you maybe thought you'd imagine, and you're having to kind of take in a lot more information, and it's information overload, and you've got to learn how to kind of manage your mentals and you got to know how to manage just everything else and make sure that you're good while you're doing your job.
I feel like there's we've all gone over some really good points about how you get in the kind of skills we're taking up right now. And I think we've lost Corinne for an internet connection thing right now, but hopefully that comes back in a second. I would say, what's the most important advice you'd have right now for anybody trying to break into your industry right now, write journalism, writing, communications, whatever that may be?
Well, I think one of the things that seems to be attractive to those who are hiring at the entry level is sort of a multitude of skills. I would say especially web communication skills, putting together web pages, posting video and stories. If you can, if you have the basics of writing a decent story for journalism, and you can write them with clarity, but also to standards. But then you can also deal with posting the pictures, the video, a little bit of design of the pages. I think that's attractive to folks who are hiring at the entry level. That may not be what you want to do. When you're more, as you get along more of your career, maybe you want to be more of a shoe leather reporter or more of a videographer, photojournalist. But those are good places to start and to see where those opportunities are.
Like that. Sorry, hopefully you didn't cut anybody off. I just really wanted to follow up what Essex was saying too. I think having an idea of how you could grow a position, coming in, you might not be starting in the exact position that you want, or you might not be doing exactly what you want, but I think coming in, I think especially in any journalism field, the number one thing would be to have some path of clips. So something that shows that you can write. So coming in with some experience, also like Essex said, having a variety of other skills that you have is always really good too. But then I think being willing to sort of start in sort of maybe a lower level position than what you want, but sort of being excited about that position and also being excited about how you want to grow it. I think that's always super impressive to see people coming in and being super excited about this position, and here are all my ideas about what I would do if I was in this position and how we could make this awesome position even more awesome.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Sarah. I think it's really going to be rare for you to find a job description, a job posting that is exactly what you want to do. I would even say it's probably impossible. But the thing is, once you get there and once you find the right newsroom, once you find, it might not be a newsroom, but once you find the right colleagues, the right manager, you can, make that role into your own, some more than others, but you can decide, do I want to get more reporting skills? Maybe you seek out a mentor in that newsroom who's a really great reporter, or maybe you're more interested in audience engagement. So once you get in the door and you start really observing how the experts are doing their jobs, it's a lot easier to say, you know what, I think that's what I want to do. That's where I want to grow my skills.
I want to say that I think it's all stuff. It's also getting a lot harder to do this now that we're in a pandemic and we don't know what those kind of opportunities are going to look like in the future. Because I keep thinking of my own newsroom where we've basically stopped internships right now because we really can't have any extra people in the building, and it's all those opportunities of where we come back in are going to look a whole lot different in the future. Even when we get past this, I think the think it's probably maybe a good point to start bringing some, because we're getting some good questions in the Q&A, and I think I'll bring in the first one. For Sarah, what skills do you think you could transfer from your PhD experience to science writing?
All of them. No. Okay, so that's not exactly correct. We don't do any bench work. I don't do any bench work now that I'm at the UW, but I think it's really important. Basically, if you have a background in science, it's really helpful for a lot of reasons. One is that I know how to read a scientific paper. So when my researchers come to me and they're like, hey, we just published this new paper, I have the skills, A, to read it, and B, to sort of analyze like what's going on. Like I can sort of peer review it myself, because I can be like, okay, well, I have a question about this because this seems fishy. Two, it's really helpful for getting my researchers to trust me. So there are some times when researchers are a little bit scared to talk to communications people, et cetera. And so it's really helpful for me to be like, oh, I have a PhD, so we can work together on this. So I think it's been really helpful for me. I can go into more details about other skills. Honestly, it is really helpful for most things, other than like maybe learning how to write, like transitioning from writing like boring scientific, sorry, it's not boring, but you know, transitioning from writing like a scientific paper to more writing like a news story was a little bit probably harder for me, just because I'd spent so many years writing scientifically. So if you are in a PhD program right now and you are interested in doing science writing, like depending on where you are in your program, depending on how you feel about science, you definitely wouldn't be hurting yourself by finishing your PhD. If you are hating your PhD program and or trying to decide if you want to do one and you want to go into science writing, I don't think that a PhD is not required. So either way is good.
Okay. This one's opened up to everybody. What are some ways to respond to any criticism you may receive or mistakes you might make as a journalist, both mentally and emotionally?
It's really important to not be afraid to apologize. And I think historically, journalists have been very reluctant to issue apologies or acknowledge errors in any way. And, you know, there's a whole side of that I won't go into on media law that I'm sure all of you in J School will be studying lots of. But I think, especially when it comes to building trust in communities, especially now, especially after everything we've seen in 2020 and all of the ways that journalists and our industry and our profession has been under attack from every side, I think it's so important to establish credibility, and that takes transparency, that takes a demonstration of a willingness to take accountability for mistakes. And the most important thing, I think, for us as journalists and communicators is to recognize our power. I mean, I think the reason we all got into this is because we understand the power of storytelling and how that can move people and how it can change policy and influence the way that our society runs. And so we need to take full responsibility that as storytellers, we hold a lot of power. We have a platform, we have a microphone, and if we make a mistake, it can have a lot of consequences for people we may not have even met. So I think, you know, just be willing to demonstrate humility and accountability.
I couldn't agree with what Corinne said more. I would also add that on kind of the flip side of that, so there's like the sort of accountability piece that she's talking about, which is super important. And then on the flip side of that, you know, as a social justice columnist, I write on issues that are pretty controversial, and I get an incredible amount of critical feedback. And a lot of the critical feedback is along the lines of race or gender or sexual orientation, very much targeted personally at me. And I think, you know, there's never been a time when you could access so many different channels to tell someone how insult them in different ways, right? I've got email, Twitter, Facebook, like there's so many ways that people can reach me and tell me that. And it's really hard to take a lot of times, and that's just real. And I think one of the things that I've tried to do is take advantage of the support at work and my colleagues, as well as in channels like the National Journalists of Color Slack, and just seeing that there's other people out there that have similar experiences. I'm not alone. Because I think that experience of sort of feeling like all these things are coming at you in all these different directions, and you're just sort of being the, you know, the target board and these horrific comments and messages that no one would ever say to my face in a million years, but they feel comfortable doing it behind, you know, behind a keyboard or behind a screen. And I think that it can be really isolating, and it's seriously driving women and people of color out of this profession. So I think one of the things that we're going to need to do more of is figure out how to be that support for each other. So while we're being accountable to the community, we're also being accountable to the people that are doing this work and are really being kind of the, you know, the target practice for folks who don't like what we're saying, especially when it comes to race and gender.
Yeah, every time I read one of these columns, you know, one of the reasons I like to read the Seattle Times Online is I like to read the comments after and stories, and Naomi can't have comments on her story. And I still look for them. Oh, that's right. Naomi can't have comments on her stories because so much ugliness is out there. And I think that is sad. And, you know, to the degree that we can support each other, I think Naomi is right.
I think that's a really good segue into this next question. Naomi, when you talk about women and people of color leaving because of just the assault and abuse that comes in through all forms right now, is this question: have there been times when you felt like your job was not for you anymore, and if so, how did you work around it?
Been there a few times. It's definitely like having that newsroom support, and as a journalist of color, when you're the only African American or only person of color in your newsroom, you kind of have a target on your back already. And so, you know, that you're never going to be perfect, kind of dovetailing off the last question. You're never going to be perfect. Mistakes will be made, but at the same time, I think the one thing that you want a support system inside your newsroom, and then also understanding that this job is not going to make or break your career. And if you stay true to yourself and you stay true to the talent and stay true to what you've been able to do, I'm sorry, I go to the Bible for this, kind of quote my mom here. Your gift will make room for you. And I firmly believe that the gift that you have, whether it's print, whether it's radio, whether it's TV, there will be people who see that, and then you can, you know, just keep pushing yourself, and somebody will see that, and they will make room for you. So that's what I've always done. So just keep pushing.
I want to second that. You know, we kind of talked about this already too, about how we're at this weird point in the communications journalism field right now with like everything rapid fire going on. And I work in a news office at a university, but sort of what's happening in journalism is also affecting us because our job is to support journalists. And so we're all trying to shift too, to be like, well, what do journalists need? How can we change what we're doing to better support the journalists that we're working with? And I had one of my colleagues, sort of seconding Andrew, one of my colleagues came to me and said, I don't, you know, we had a relationship where she felt comfortable telling me, like, I don't know what to do with, you know, with what I'm doing. And I don't know how to shift how I'm stuck in this job, in this position. And so we could talk about it and sort of help her sort of figure out how to pivot her job so that she could, you know, it became something that she wanted to do instead of her being like, I don't know what to do with this. And so I really like what Andrew said is having somebody in your organization who you can talk to and bounce ideas off of, because ultimately it's sort of a couple options, right? Like I guess you can just stay and feel like this job isn't for me, but I'm staying. You can stay and be like, how can I pivot this job into something that I want it to be? Or you can leave and be like, let me go and find another job that's actually helping me do what I want to do. And having people that you trust to help bounce all those ideas off is really helpful.
And I would say, don't give too much power to your managers, your bosses. They need to prove to you that they are worthy to judge and evaluate you. Some of them will be, truly will be, and some of them are not. Don't give them all the power.
Yeah, that's a great point. And a lot of the time, I think as you move throughout your career, you'll start hearing people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. And so that's a really good point. I think one thing that I always come back to when I'm having a tough time is asking myself, why is it that I do what I do? And for me, it's because I truly believe that journalism is a very powerful tool to achieve social justice and to help people. And I think, you know, for me, that has been more than powerful enough to sustain me through some really, really tough times. And I've noticed with some of my colleagues who've left the industry, I think it's a lot harder for people who are driven because they want to see themselves on camera or they want to see their bio on A1. And for that to be your main motivation, I think that will be really hard. I think that's not enough. And I also think that we need to put the audience first. It's not ego driven. It's not about our names and seeing that in lights. It's about who we're serving and what we're serving them with.
The next, that's some of this does line into another good question. Is like how this person asks, how to face a career change? I do have a journalism degree, however, I've not had the opportunity to jump into media yet, so I had to get experience in other fields in the meantime. Any tips?
Well, try to leverage where you are, and you know, it may not be that you can jump from one job to another, but it may be that you can add work in journalism. You know, whether it's independent journalism, whether it's a little bit of contract journalism for a particular outlet, while keeping the direction that you're in. And then maybe that builds the bridge that you can decide to move across when the opportunity comes in journalism.
I think there's a lot to be said for people looking for people who write well a lot of the time, or at least, or in the sense of if you're in video journalism, telling your narrative well and structuring it well. There's always room for people who write and tell stories well.
I would echo that 1,000%, Colin. I think it's really easy to find people who can operate a camera well and film beautiful scenes, but if they can't tell the narrative, they're not going to be able to do the job. And I'm always looking for storytelling first. And I'll say I'm not a hiring manager, but I have participated in a lot of hiring processes where I'm contributing to the decision. And my contribution is always looking for that storytelling, for that it factor, because a lot of people can identify a topic that is interesting to write about or do a video story on, but can you boil that topic down into a story? Can you get to the nut graph? Can you get to the law? Can you cut to the chase? And what is it that makes that compelling for the audience?
Yeah, and I would just add, like, I always tell students that even if they don't have necessarily that job on their resume that is a perfect fit for the job they want, to start building up their portfolio with their clips and make sure that they have a portfolio, make sure that, you know, even starting with trying to do start with a map of the different places that you could have your writing published, and then reach out to those publications. Maybe it's a community-based publication, maybe it's an online website, something like that. Ethnic media, there's like all these different places that you can, you know, get in the door a little bit easier. And then once you start building up that portfolio, then you can build on it and build on it. But if you're just kind of, you know, going on, I can write without anything to show for it, it's a little bit harder case to make.
Going off of Essex too, one of my favorite stories from when I was in science communication school was that one of my teachers really wanted to do photography, but when she was in the same program that I was in, they were like really anti anything except writing. It was just like, you need to only have writing skills. And she was like, sorry, I really want photography like on my resume too. And so she was at her internship at a local paper, and she just started bringing her camera to her interviews. Like, she, you know, obviously was there to interview the people, tell their stories, but she brought her camera along too. And then lo and behold, her picture started showing up in the newspaper with her writing. And so she started to also be collecting both writing clips and photography clips like Naomi said, which is great because then she could start marketing herself as like, hey, I'm a writer, but I also have photos that have been published, as you can see here. So I think trying to like get more of what you want to do into your current job or trying to do something on the side, very helpful.
I'm gonna run a little out of order on this for attendees on the Q&A on this, just because I think this is a really relevant one right now. What are ways you found to combat imposter syndrome? I think we may have touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think it's worth talking about explicitly.
Be you and be ethical. That's the two things that I learned. And when I first started in radio, some of the students out there might not know who Jim Rome is. If you do, well done. But I wanted to be like
rack 'em.
Right. But I wanted to be. I always wanted to be the black version of Jim Rome, and then my boss, he pulled me into his office one day. He said, "I heard you wanted to be the black Jim Rome." He was like, "That's cool." He's like, "Be Andrew Hammond," and I'm like, "All right." He was like, "Be you." Like, there's so many people who, and he said this. He said, "There's so many people who have high-paying jobs that are essentially doing a copycat version of somebody else, and they got a cadence that's somebody else." He was like, the most organic, like you can tell who is being true to themselves, who's actually passionate about it and actually understands, okay, this is how I step out of getting out of somebody else's shadow or copying somebody else's style. So I just say be you and be ethical, because people respect that more.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I would say, if you're worried about imposter syndrome, spend a few hours on Twitter checking all the things that major journalism organizations have done wrong, have to correct, have to retract, have to apologize for. And if like Andrew says, you are sticking to your integrity and what you are interested in and your drive, you will not feel like an imposter much anymore, because it's appalling, some of the things that have happened at major worldwide organizations.
I just want to add too that unfortunately, imposter syndrome is something that never really goes away. Like, you can be super successful or at least look super successful and still feel like an imposter. So really it's also just learning how to live with it. So for example, I noticed that whenever I sat down to write a story, I would freak out with like the blank Word document on the page. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. Like, every single time, regardless of how many stories I've written in my life. And so I basically made a template that has words on it to be like, insert title here. And, like, basically it's a little template that I can use for every single one of my stories. And that way, when I open that document, there are words on it. So it's not blank. We can do this. So I think also just getting to know ways to sort of acknowledge, like, oh, here we are again, feeling like an imposter, but it's okay. Maybe go check out Twitter and see what some other people have done, like Essex said, and then just keep going, being yourself.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Not to sound like a broken record, but I do think it's important to mention that, imposter syndrome is compounded by your marginalization as a person. So if you're the only woman or if you're the only person of color, it's going to make all those things more acute. And I think it's just really important to acknowledge that and recognize that, and recognize the role that these journalists of color organizations and other associations provide in being that sort of mirror to say, like, you're not alone. Other people have been in that boat, and you've got support out there, and you can push through it, because it's very hard to be alone in that way. And I don't want to minimize that or say you can just sort of hope that it just goes away, because it doesn't.
Certainly not. I mean, I would say like 15 years in my business, I still feel like I've had it, and I have that imposter syndrome from time to time. And I've had just about almost all the advantages you could ask for, because to most people, I look white, and they don't give it a second thought. So it's kind of more like I have to help make it better for people who don't have those advantages and come after me. And sorry, I've made that an awkward segue into the next question. Next question we have coming up is, I am a film student, but I'm also interested in working in journalism. What is your advice to get started and who to network with? Corinne, I feel like this might be more up your alley.
Yeah, and my advice is going to apply to anyone. It's not really necessarily what your background is now, but what is the work you want to be making? And reach out to those people. Are you interested in doing interactive video storytelling, documentary storytelling like we do at the Seattle Times? Well, you should probably email me or somebody else on staff and show us your best work and ask, make a very specific ask, because everyone is super busy, especially now. And I can tell you I'm really burnt out, and don't take it personally if this professional journalist doesn't respond to you, but they're way more likely to respond to you if you say, I was wondering what you think of this soundbite at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and this is why I'm thinking about that. If you have one tiny little thing, you're way more likely to get a response. But I think it's really important to start reaching out to the people who are doing the work you like to do. If you really love some of the programming that KIRO is doing, figure out who's making that, and figure out if, is there a way that you can get connected with those people. And I think it'll be harder, the bigger the publication you get, but there are such great things happening everywhere. I think a lot of people are just like, I loved this New York Times story, I want to know more about it. But look at what your local papers are doing. The Seattle Times we're 160 people. We're also pretty big regionally. What about some smaller organizations? What about some of the startups, online-only publications? Really look to the people making the work you want to do and ask them how they got where they are. I think each of us has had such a different path to where we are. But that would be my recommendation. And then my second would be make a bunch of things that are in the vein of the work you want to be doing, and have that portfolio to show. Because just like all these panelists said earlier, we can look at your resume. Okay, you went to a good school. Okay, you say that you know how to write a press release, you know how to do this and that. We need the proof. We need to see the work you've done and have a good example of that.
I think we might have time for two more after the questions after this. This one's got a lot of votes from Gloria, and she says, I'm an experienced journalist in my home country. English isn't my native language. How do I get back in the job field knowing that the media here don't understand my portfolios? And we may not have an answer, but it's something I wanted to posit out there. Anyone?
I just wonder if they could be translated. I don't know what that really looks like, but perhaps it could be translated, and then it would be easier.
I just want to make a plug for the organizations that are sponsoring this too. Like, I think being a member of a professional organization means that you can find like-minded or individuals or like people with careers that you're interested in, or maybe somebody who's had this experience. And I think being a member of this type of professional organization helps you connect with people who can help you. And so I think in addition to sort of having clips and a good resume, I mean, the other thing is that if you can have somebody who can vouch for you, who can be like, hey, so-and-so is great, and they, you may or may not be able to read the stuff in their portfolio, but I've worked with them on these projects. Like being able to have somebody who has your back is also really helpful.
Okay. And I think this might be the last one we have time for. We're getting close to 3 o'clock. And so we'll go with Jared Brown here. How have each of you navigated determining whether an organization is the right fit? What type of questions do you ask hiring managers, and how do you find a newsroom and team that shares your values? There's a lot there.
For me, asking what are the demographics of your staff, diversity-wise, and if the manager can't answer that off the top of their head, for me, that's a red flag, because for me, that is very important. Or if they, of course, if they're like, this is the latest I know, fine, whatever. But if they are just like, oh, I don't know, if they've never looked, that's a red flag for me. So that's a question I always recommend people to ask.
knowing the culture of an organization or asking about the culture of an organization, like, is it going to be something where it's very top down and hierarchical? Is it something where, you know, folks at all levels of the organization can collaborate and contribute and are listened to? I think those things are really important and contribute to the kind of culture that, you know, depending on who you are and your priorities, and it's very important to me. So that'd be something that I would want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Former employees, people who've left there. I generally like to talk to people who left on good terms because you kind of get a more realistic situation of what's going on, and really just kind of look at the hiring history of managers that actually come into these organizations when you're already there, and ask those questions, because I think even though it might be uncomfortable, at the same time somebody's going to understand, oh, okay, this is what I'm kind of getting into, and they kind of get a sense of what you're bringing to the table and where you're sitting.
You know, and for television, you know, just watch what you see on television. You can see that superficially, but you can also see, you know, what's behind that. You can begin to think about the organizational goals, the organizational decision making, the organizational approach. Who do you see presenting stories? What kinds of stories do you see presented? What kind of take do those stories have? How are those stories shaped and framed? You know, that will, if you know, watch television and see if it's something that connects with you or something that you're concerned about.
For me, I came in to this position and I was like, hey, I want to do all the stuff that you want me to do, but I have like some goals here that I like. Here are things that I want to do with this position. Here's what I want to have these experiences. I want to grow this position, and sort of seeing in the interview process too of how my potential boss was going to react to that. The interview in general, like, did it seem like people would be okay with that? Would they not be okay? Like, you know, I could tell. I did this one interview where I was answering the questions correctly. I was like, okay, I can tell I'm making this one guy who would be my boss happy, but I was like, I don't think I could do this constantly. Like, this is not a good fit for me. So I think really being able to read the room to make sure that you're going to be able to get what you want out of it.
For sure. And that is 3 o'clock, and so we'd love to keep going. There are so many more questions in there that are good ones, but this is where we kind of need to start with the breakout sessions.
Colin,
and so yeah.
Corinne reminded me of something that's really a favorite principle of mine. Could I share it? It only takes I hope 45 seconds here.
Do it.
Okay. This comes from one of the New Yorker's writers and book authors, Ken Auletta. He does a lot of their media writing. And one of the things he wrote in a book that's stuck with me, so I always have it handy somewhere in my files. And he says, the acorn of good journalism is humility. Humility is required to use two of the journalist's irreplaceable tools: the curiosity to ask questions and the ability to listen to the answers. Thank you.
I love it. That's good. Oh, that's good. Great point. And I want to thank all of you again for joining us and being part of this panel today. I learned a lot myself too, and I just think that's just great answers, great questions. Thank you all for being here. And next, I'd like to bring Elizabeth back in to explain how the breakout sessions are going to work. Panelists, you guys can turn off your cameras and microphones for this point, because Elizabeth's going to take over and explain everything for the next part as you go to your tables.
Thanks, Colin, and thank you, panelists, for that amazing discussion. Okay, so we're going to break up into individual tables now. You all elected when you registered for 2 areas of interest. So if you don't remember, I'm going to drop the link to the breakout sessions in the chat. So just to orient you, there are 2 floors. So the tables are on both floors. On floor 1 are broadcast tables 1 through 6, newsprint 1 through 6, visual 1, and books 1. And then on floor 2 are books 2 through 5, visual 2 through 4, media and communications 1 through 5, and nonprofit and communications 1 through 4. Note, I got a note from Cameron that there's an extra nonprofit and corporate communications number 1. So look for the table that Cameron's stall is at. So when you arrive at your table, make sure you turn on your camera and your mic. And then if a table is full, go to another table in that same area with a free seat. Each table should have 1 mentor. If you're having problems, go to the help desk, or you can chat Soumita, Colin, or I, and we can help you. There are several free tables on each floor. So if you want to have a side conversation or meet with someone individually, look for those tables labeled free table. We'll be sending out a notice at the top of the banner of this conference, alerting you to a remaining 5 minutes and then a 1-minute one, or we break up the first session and move to the second session. So happy, fruitful conversations, everyone.